Well, let's get started anyways. While we've invited a few folks who's been reporting their experience with version 12. So version 12 was released to employees, about 15,000 employees about a month ago. Holmar's catalog, Omar was one of the only people who did not who was not an employee that had access to it about exactly a month ago. And then just 2 nights ago, Teslascope reported that version 12.2.1 is going out beyond Tesla employees and to special groups for the first time. And in their analysis, they found that it was being randomized through an initial wave that should include 0.5 to 2% of eligible vehicles, including both hardware 3 and hardware 4. So what's very unique about this specific scenario is that doesn't look like that they're going through the standard, early beta tester group that we're all very familiar with. It didn't go through that route. It went through Omar, and then it went to just everybody out there, as many people. And as the reports are coming in, when Omar first used it, he was very disappointed, said that it was very hesitant. He had to press the accelerator several times. It could also have been that he was using it during rain moments, but so far, of all the people that are reporting, they're reporting that it's really good. Version 12 compared to version 11, it's now solving many of the different edge cases that version 11 and previous versions always had troubles with. Things like, just the dips on the road and doing U-turns, going through some roundabouts, even gates and compounds. These things are now being solved. And it's much more comfortable. So a few people are saying that it feels, that it's passing the spouse test. Now, it's still very early. We just received some early word from folks, but so far it's looking really good. And then what was very interesting was Tesla Economics tweeted out saying that, is the ChatGPT moment for autonomous driving is going to be happening soon. And Elon actually liked that tweet. So maybe we're reading way too much into it. So the first half of this space, we're going to talk about FSD and how that's being perceived and how likely that will be a ChatGPT moment. And then the second half, we're going to review all of the Tesla bot competitors. We've got Scott Walter joining us as well. Oh, he just dropped off. He was here for a second. So let's get started with FSD. So Jeff and Xander, why don't you start sharing what your thoughts are?
I'm surprised, I guess I'm not surprised, but I thought there would be a lot more regression cleanup, and there probably will be. It looks like they stopped their release to deal with an issue in terms of it going even wider. But it looks like it got out to a number of people, but it looks like there's a minor thing that they've got to address, and that they'll probably restart it. They may restart it under a new version, is what I heard. But all in all, I mean, when you make an architecture change as big as this, I'm not surprised that it's taken them a couple of months to get this out, because you're usually dealing with something called regression, which are bugs in software that make it worse than the current option available for people to use. And you don't want a regression in a case like this. So, but it looks like they have a really good QA process. It gets through QA, then it goes out to employees, and then from employees it goes to a kind of a smaller core group of external drivers, then eventually a larger group. So it sounds like they have a good process. So for me, I think this is, if I'm thinking about, Herbert and your milestones, I'm thinking about Tesla going, their priorities have to be getting, FSD wide, on Teslas. Right now, there's about 6 million Teslas on the road, and about a third of them are in the US. A big chunk are in China, rest of Asia, and then Europe. So, I would have to think that getting those other 4 million, when people talk about FSD take rate, they don't realize that it's not available outside of North America. So you really got to look at the number of cars that it's available for, that can download it versus the number of cars that can, that are downloading it. So the take rate's actually higher. And what I think, when people see a release like this, I think they're going to go in and, there's people on the sidelines saying, I'm going to go subscribe, or, or my next Tesla, I'm going to go buy it outright. They're going to do one of the two. And I hope Tesla also comes up with something a little bit more flexible for people, whether it's by the mile or by the trip or something like that. I think that would also be helpful. But yeah, I think when I think of milestones, I think of like, what does this all mean? To me, it means they're getting closer to going wide globally. It looks like the actual experience is improving to the point where it is something you want to just jump in your car in the garage and drive off to your destination every time now, versus worrying about having to deal with multiple kinds of intervention. It looks more human like. And then so yeah, I think of milestones. I think of going wide. Then I think of FSD licensing and really kind of ratcheting up the value of the company and having it looked at it in a completely different way. We just saw today that the head of hardware, all the way from the silicon level to the end system level engineering for Cruise, resigned. So, I mean, there's a lot of movement out there. And I think Tesla has a solution that can not only scale from a volume perspective, it's got the opportunity now to go on 6 million vehicles. What other autonomous system is even close? It's not even close. And then the most important thing is it can economically scale as well. And then when you bring licensing in, I think it takes it to a whole new level. So I'm pretty excited about these events.
Yeah, so a couple of things that was interesting about this rollout last night, right? First was that they skipped the early, beta testers. They went straight to just the randomized selection. And two, Tesla Scope confirmed that this is not just restricted to California, that this is going across the country as well. So that is very interesting. Those 2 points alone make me believe that this is, they're treating this, at least they might believe that there's less chance of critical errors. That could be the case. And then there was another thing that happened. AI Driver posted a video of showing that FSD version 12 can now make U-turns. And then, who was it now? No, hold on here. I just had it, and then I jumped out of it. Sorry, guys. And then Parallel Jane, who is the Tesla works at Tesla FSD team, he replied saying, "Best part, no dedicated effort went into let's make U-turns work," saying that they did not write code to deal with this particular edge case. The system, the neural net, the AI just figured this out on its own. So that was very interesting. Are you there, Xander? Did you get a chance to speak with Sat?
I did get to speak with Sat, and but I don't know, why are we wasting our time talking about FSD 12 rollout when we figured out Elon's burner account and he's spending 8 hours on Spaces talking to us and not at Tesla. This is preposterous. What are we doing?
Yeah, that was funny. Yep.
Yeah. So Sat reported he was in the rain in California. So he reported that it's smooth. I mean, he posted a couple of videos. He's currently at a doctor's appointment, so he said he'll come in about 45 minutes or so. So maybe we'll get it from first person perspective. It would be better. But for me, the real big thing is. I did talk to an employee today, and he confirmed that they have started randomizing how they're rolling it out, as opposed to which has been confirmed. So I'm not saying anything new, but for me, the big thing is I think this is like that moment that it isn't ChatGPT yet, because the beta label hasn't been removed, but this is the moment where we'll remember and look back at yesterday as that point when FSD started rolling out wide, and you could see it by their actions. Something has changed. They're not going through the standard procedures of rolling it through, the highly qualified people. Now they're just rolling it out randomly. I think that's a significant milestone.
Yeah, so right now it's very early. I've collected at least 8 different people, and their comments have been very, very positive. And then one of them said, my spouse was very excited, felt that it was really good, made a huge difference. So what will it take for it to have a ChatGPT moment, guys? What do you guys think needs to happen? Just random people on X saying, hey, it looks great. Is that enough? How many people out there needs to be so excited to really believe? And what kind of if this continues, this excitement, is that enough, or there needs to be more statistics, more valid information? What's a ChatGPT moment?
I think Tesla's got to start talking about the take rate. They need to start talking about the denominator and the numerator, because there's a lot of confusing data out there. There's people that are just publishing data that they do some randomized survey, and then they say that that's a take rate, and it gets used in perpetuity. It's the same take rate that's been used for 2 years. So I think they need to come out and say, look, before V12, and maybe there's some settling period where they need some additional time, but in the middle part of this year, we'd love to hear about the take rate, or as soon as possible. And then, is it good enough to make an ad? That Tesla's doing running ads on X and YouTube now. Is it good enough to make its own dedicated ad? And because you think about it, Tesla hasn't necessarily been putting FSD in everyone's faces. When you think about the ads they're running, they're talking about the price point, they're talking about the safety, they're talking about a number of things with owning a Tesla and owning an EV, but don't talk about autonomous driving. So I think when you start seeing an ad for it, they're they'll be confident enough that they're putting money behind it. So I would say ad dollar money behind it, obviously putting money behind it, but I think that would be an interesting moment, and I think that will help expose it to more and more people. There's 500 million people that connect on X, and it'd be great at this. What we're seeing now with V12 is just we're in this little bubble of the Tesla community, and it'd be great for this to somehow get outside that bubble, whether it's an ad or something else. But it's going to need to be something like that. And again, I've said this on Spaces, and I've said this in some of our YouTube podcasts. I'm not impressed. So with ChatGPT, and just the capability and error rates of these language models, they're not perfect. They're not giving you 99.9%. You put a prompt in, you get a desired response. It's definitely garbage in, garbage out, but it's also just I would say a high percentage of the time I'm not getting the data I need. Now it's improving, I would say, but whereas even with FSD 11, most of greater than, I would say, 98, 99% of the time, I'm having an error-free experience. So anyway, I think Tesla's far and away in terms of what they architected, its ability to scale, and they've got to be able to come out and really tell that. It's the other thing, they have that ChatGPT moment. They got to come out and tell the story. Maybe a 30-second ad's part of it, but also just they themselves have like, look, if the data says that they've solved this with some amount of regression, they should come out and tell the story and not do it in the AI day nerdy way, 4-hour recruiting. That's a recruiting event. They have to come out and tell it in a way where the analysts and the broader community would understand, like, there's a breakthrough here when we've done it. The short answer to your question is Tesla's got to be able to tell that story.
Yeah, but is that enough? Because the reason why ChatGPT went viral or had its moment is because it was the most widely adopted app ever, right? Blew everything away. Everybody just downloaded it. They got to experience it. They got to play with it. They were so shocked with how incredibly sharp and smart it was. So I'm just trying to look at the stats here. But of course, 100 million people are now using it on a monthly basis as of January. 2 months after launch. 2 months after launch, 100 million monthly active users. So for Tesla, is it enough that a handful of people, let's say even like 400,000 beta testers are now using it? Is that enough? is that, I think the videos, maybe the people saying, hey, robotaxi is just around the corner, or there has to be viral videos, or do people need to be butts in seat? They need to be sitting in and let me see how this really works. And then could that be enough? Your thoughts on that, Hans or Scott?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I think that, the number that you pointed out there, the 100 million units in 2 months, like that's just not a number that Tesla can compete with, because there's not 100 million Teslas on the road. And obviously, FSD is not going to be something in the near term that runs on non-Tesla vehicles. And so, it's going to be a scaled down version of what that is. But that 100 million number, that's a third of the population of the United States, roughly. It's a global number, but that's where this global conversation started and really arose from, is everyone, at least knew someone who had hands-on exposure to the system. And unfortunately, that's just not going to be the case for Tesla FSD. It will be an incredible thing. It will be something that a large number of people can use at some point. But I think that we can't really say that it is a ChatGPT equivalent moment for FSD until it at least is accessible to every Tesla vehicle on the road today that is interested in it and has some sort of a low barrier to entry, which is basically the same point that I made in the conversation that we had earlier today, that it needs to be free or close to free for someone who owns a Tesla in North America to experience FSD for themselves. And I think that, from Tesla's standpoint, that's not something that they're willing to do yet, because that would pose a significant safety risk. And, unlike ChatGPT, like that can, to Jeff's point, make errors left, right, and center. And it's like, okay, well, that's not that big of a deal. It's just text. If FSD version 12 is subjected to the law of large numbers, then there will be mistakes, if you roll it out to an entire fleet. And so you have to be very, very, very confident in its safety critical capability in order to make a bold move like that. But, that's basically what's going to be required in order to, get anywhere close to actually having a ChatGPT moment.
Okay, well, let's switch gears to bots. And so we've got Scott Walter here. I don't know how long I'll have him here. And then we are inviting folks who have experienced FSD directly and more of the beta testers as well. So while we're waiting for them to join. So with the bots, as you guys know, I have a channel called Brighter with Herbert on YouTube, and I've been interviewing Tesla bot competitors. We've interviewed the CEO of Figure, Brett Idcock. I've interviewed the CTO of Sanctuary, Suzanne Gildert, and I actually have on tap the CEO of Aptronic, the CEO of 1X Technologies, which is Eve and Neo, and also Agility Robots, which is Digit. I'll also have agreed to join us. In the same time, Scott Walter, John Gibbs, and Cern Basher and I have formed a company called Human Bots, and it's going to be the first humanoid bot consulting company, and also human scale bots as well. We're going to help any business, factory or otherwise, create business cases to understand how to improve their business or factory. So if you know somebody, or you are somebody as part of a business, you can hire us to create you a consulting kind of a business case to find out if this can impact your business in a positive way, but also to put in your orders with these bot companies now, so you get ahead of them. So we've put together a table. Many of you might have seen it already, but it lists the top 15 bot companies out there, of which half of them are US based and the other half are in China. And so what we wanted to do is evaluate who has commercial focus, who actually has the ability to have bipedal locomotion, have hands and don't have hands, who's actually demoed useful work, who has the ability to have LLM and voice integration, who's demoed autonomous work. and who's announced pilots and partnerships. So Scott, since you're here, what I thought we'd do is go through each one of these and you tell us, share what you know about each of these bot companies and robots and how they fit. I think that might be a good way for us to be introduced to them. Does that make sense?
Sure does. And the thing to know is that most of the information that we're getting is just what's sort of publicly available, that CERN's been doing a lot of the digging and research, what's on their websites and everything else. And some of the information that's out there may be more design specs as opposed to what's actually been achieved. And we were really reticent on how we wanted to come up with this table and whether we wanted to do it just alphabetically, because we're not saying that one particular company is necessarily better or is in the lead over something else. We decided to more or less just come up with what we thought were some important milestones, but not grade the milestones. So, publicly walking, okay, that's a good milestone, but we can always argue who walked better, who was going faster, this and that. And that becomes a bit trickier because we don't have enough information or data to be able to do that specifically. And that's something we hope to get over time. So part of the reason for us putting this together is that we are getting a lot of feedback from the various CEOs of these different companies to help us fill this thing out to make sure it's accurate. So the first thing that CERN tried to make very clear, and it wasn't clear to everyone, because one of our debates was, okay, who should be at the top of the list? Because someone's always going to be at the top of the list. And no matter who you put up there, it's going to draw the ire of one side or the other. Right. And so we are not saying that Figure AI is number one and that Tesla is number two. We are saying that they are the ones that have met these milestones. And you can decide amongst yourself whether you think one is in the lead or not until we are able to get more information. So for the most part, I think of this as like spring training. You go out, you kind of look how the rookies are doing. You're seeing that some of them are, getting some pretty good cuts there. But, one of them is not maybe doing so well in the league standings because, they're playing some of the younger players. They're not really out there to win. The pitchers are only going 3 innings and stuff like that. You don't really have good statistics about how the team is doing. You really won't know until opening day, and opening day has not occurred yet. So these are the Grapefruit League results as far as I'm concerned right now. And it gives us an idea of, we're kind of handicapping a little bit because, that's what the sports reporters will do. They'll look at it and they'll say, yeah, the Yankees look pretty good this year. Boston, not so much, just based on what I'm saying. But things then change, the season starts and suddenly it turns out one team has maybe a lot more in reserve. So that's why we've kind of gone through here to see, because some of the information is not necessarily reliable, because just because they say something like, walking speed 5 miles per hour, it does not mean they've achieved that. Just because they say the bot weighs maybe 135 pounds doesn't mean it really does. It means that's probably what they would like to design it to. So until we really see more public demonstrations, we really won't be able to say who is going to be the best. The one thing we can say, it doesn't matter. The total addressable market is so big. You can talk about, the competition is coming all day. It doesn't matter. They will not be competing against themselves for quite a while, because everyone, if you were able to come up with one of these bots tomorrow to do it, everyone would want one. So you would have no problem. The thing is, it's not going to be a demand problem. It's just going to be a supply problem.
Okay, so I think the way to do this is, obviously this is not an all-inclusive list. We're creating a website where we're going to have the largest, most comprehensive database of all humanoid and human scale bots. And for each of the companies, we will have videos and, reviews and our analysis, as well as, categorizing what they can and can't do, what they publicly and have said and were allowed to say. So the list that we have at this point is Figure AI, Tesla, Agility Robotics has a bot called Digit, Sanctuary has a bot called Phoenix, Abtronic is named Apollo, 1X Technologies has 2 bots, one called Eve with wheels, and Neo is going to be their humanoid bot. Boston Dynamics and IHMC are both research phase. They publicly have said that they're not yet working on commercial offerings. Those are the US-based ones. Then you've got Fourier Intelligence, Unitree, LimX, AGIBot, Magic Lab, UBTech, Kepler, Xiaopeng, and Xiaomi. These are the Chinese companies that we're evaluating and reviewing. So why don't we go through Figure
Right,
AI?
right.
Tell us what you know about it.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just stop. So 1X Technologies is actually based in Norway. So they're not North American, but all the others are North American. So Sanctuary is Vancouver. It's up in Canada. I'm not sure where IHMC is situated, but I guess it's US. And then the rest of them. Now, we color coded them. And the Chinese bots are red because that is basically the color of China, not because it's a warning sign or that they're at the bottom or anything else. It's just that we figured it'd be a much easier way to be able to distinguish sort of which grouping. So think about it, American League East and West or something like that, or American League National League, however you want to look at that for those analogies. So the other thing is that there are probably a lot of others out there that we haven't heard of, and it's hard to tell how legitimate they are. And even then, there may be one or two on here where we're kind of, maybe it's a bit dubious of whether they actually have a true offering yet. But we felt they had to be on the list because obviously they've been making a splash, and people want to know, what have they shown, what are their capabilities or potential capabilities. But okay, start from the top. You ready to go, Herbert?
Yeah, I think we can. I think Xander has his hand up. You want to ask a question, Xander?
Yeah, quick question before you guys get into it. When Scott, when you were describing the companies, and is there a data advantage requirement here for Tesla? We obviously understand that the manufacturing piece is unlocked for Tesla, but how does that data component play into deciding who's going to be winners or losers here?
Well, data and compute, I think, is going to be very important. And that's one of those things that is probably the hardest for us to be able to judge right now, because we're kind of looking around to see, what kind of data compute they have or access to data, and how are they generating it. And so from some of these interviews, we're getting a pretty good idea of how they're trying to do it. In some cases, they're trying to do, synthetic data just by doing lots and lots of simulations. But at the same time, they need to get real world data to kind of tune the results from the simulations to the real world physics that they're going to see. And part of that means also getting training data, which will be done probably telerobotically, where a human operator is going to manipulate it and then just do the same thing again and again. And then also, there will be a lot of autonomous, where it just runs it again and again and again and tries to do sort of the reinforcement learning to improve itself. Now, you may notice not on the list is we didn't put like the Aloha project or something like that, because those are pure research, university projects. We also don't have, Romella on here, which has also done a lot of work in the area, just because we're really looking at those that are thinking of commercializing it. So there's certainly a lot of others going on out there. And the reason why I bring up those projects is that it's a real head scratcher on what the data advantage is going to be, because Aloha is showing that, with very few examples, they're able to get reasonable results. The robots to run autonomously and be successful like 70–80% of the time. And that's remarkable results. So at this point, I'm not sure what the data advantages are going to be for one company over the other. A lot of it's just going to be how they figure out how to leverage what they have and what kind of control systems they're going to have. So certainly, if you look at some of the interviews we have, like Suzanne Gildert, she gives a very good explanation of what their strategy is to be able to collect the data and what they believe is needed in order to be able to solve, because they really want to solve AGI, and she believes that has to be done through some form of embodiment. Tesla may or may not be trying to solve, or Elon may or may not be really trying to solve AGI through Optimus. It may be that's a stepping stone to get there, but it may not be, let's say, the major focus For them, the major focus is that it does a useful work. And so the amount of training and data you need for that might be a lot smaller. Again, talking with Brett Adcock, they're also trying to get as much training data as possible, which is why they need to move out of the lab, and they're trying to bring it into pilot production to capture as much real world data as they can to see what it is they're going to need to move forward. And of course, the big question is, and this is kind of open for speculation, is Figure is a pretty small company, and we know that they've raised, I think, around 70 million about a year ago, which we know in Silicon Valley, that doesn't go very far, especially if you need to get access to compute. So they must have some sort of agreements or doing something to be able to get access to compute, or they've found a way to be able to do it with just a small number of GPUs without a huge training cluster or anything like that. So these are, it's a pretty long answer to what is a simple question, right? And I guess maybe the best answer is, at this point, we don't know enough to be able to say who's really has an advantage, because everything is changing really quickly. One day Sam Altman says he needs $7 trillion because I guess he needs to buy a lot of computing. So it's like, oh, it's a really hard problem. They need a lot of compute. And then we're seeing other things where they're getting results without a whole lot of compute. So I'm not sure exactly what the answer is going to be. And we'll find out. We're probably going to find out in the next 12 to 18 months.
There's so much activity that's happened in just the first 2 months of this year. We've heard, obviously, Tesla drop demos of showing both the AI skills and the Gen 2 that happened in December. You got Figure dropping a demo of an autonomous bot doing manipulating a Keurig. Then you've got announcements from Figure for BMW.
Right.
Sanctuary AI, they've also are about to make a big announcement in a couple of weeks or so. So these things are all happening pretty quickly. Anybody want to, so it just seems like there's just going to be more demos. Do you think demos is enough for a ChatGPT moment for bots if they keep showing that these bots are able to do more and more useful work? Or again, what needs to happen for that moment to happen for Tesla, for people to realize that Tesla has a tremendous asset and a tremendous value that is not being counted in the stock yet?
Okay, it's going to be hard to determine what that is, because I think what I'll do is I'll use an example that Metaphor, who you may see posting out on X, is pretty active in the AI community, and he is saying that we may have already had AGI. It's just that the goalposts keep moving on what the definition of AGI is, and I feel it may almost be the same thing. So if Tesla drops, or Figure, or even Agility drops a demonstration that shows that the bot's doing really useful work in some sort of factory setting, and you could almost argue that Agility has done that. They were at a trade show a year ago where the bots were taking the pallets off of shelves and bringing them over to the conveyor. Kind of looks like something useful. Okay, it wasn't in a factory setting, and you might say, well, how flexible was it really? Is it up and running? Is it useful in a real factory situation? That looked pretty impressive, but still wasn't enough for people to say that it was a ChatGPT moment, because at that point they had done everything without implementing the LLMs, and of course they're busy doing that right now, as a lot of the others. So now you'll literally be able to sort of talk more to the bot and have it do certain tasks, and we're starting to see that. But again, we're seeing them more in these video examples that are being done in a laboratory, and it doesn't seem to impress anyone, because it's going to be something more than that. So is the goalpost going to be that they have a project, and we know Agility has announced a project with Amazon, and maybe they're doing something, and then next week or the week after they show something and it's like really is working, it's doing the same thing as everyone else? Will that be the moment? Or we'll say, well, that's not quite enough. It's going to be more impressive. We want a more public demonstration. We want people to be able to actually go up and ask the bot to do a variety of things and see that it can do it very easily, almost like the Keurig demo that Figure did, where just putting the coffee maker there and saying, Figure, make a cup of coffee, and it goes and executes a certain particular task. That impressed a lot of people, but and let's say it impressed a lot of the people that really understands what has to be accomplished there. But for the general public, it seems like, oh, it's just a very simple trick. There's not a whole lot there. He can't do more than that, right? Because that's the only thing he was taught on. So once the training sets get more rich and once it's able to do a little bit more, we will probably see it. But again, the question is, every time you get that demonstration, is it going to be enough to satisfy everyone? Or are they going to say, well, wait a minute, I still want to see one more thing after that? What's your feeling? What would convince you that we've hit a ChatGPT moment?
I think it has to hit, like we said, hundreds of millions of people. And so, my wife and children need to be talking about this, going, "Oh my God, humanoid bots are here." It needs to show, I think, that people need to be, without doubt, nobody thinking it's CGI, nobody thinking that it was faked, that it was just kind of all sped up, that humanoid bots actually can do useful work and are in a factory now doing useful work. And then I think at that point, I don't even need it to be a ChatGPT moment. I just need it to be a moment when investors recognize that this is inevitable and they should invest now. And I think it's going to happen sooner than people think. I think that's why I've been saying I think the bot might actually be a bigger mover for Tesla stock than FSD. The only thing I can see that can happen for FSD would be that if they can do reverse summon and summon in a parking lot. I've been saying this for quite a while, that if they can, if you can have a car pick you up at the front of a Target and then drop you off at the Target and it goes find its own parking lot, people will take videos of that and then they'll post it on TikTok and share it on social media, and that could go viral. And I think a bot, again, if you're just watching videos, it may not be enough. They might need to see it in person. So maybe if Tesla has Tesla bots in their stores and people can actually interact with it and you can talk to it and it talks to you back and you can ask it to pick up my red ball in their lobby, that will be enough to get people to take videos and talk about it and say, we're here. But it's got to be like that. It's got to be way beyond. That's my thinking.
Okay, my thinking is that, but going a little bit back in time. So as imagine if this happened, what would it be, over 50 years ago? Suddenly the bot would have come out on like the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and there would have been some sort of interaction that just would have impressed everyone, the audience, Ed and Johnny and all that, talking to the bot to do this and that, and which they could see it wasn't scripted, that it was really doing those things. So is there like a forum like that exists right now where something like that could happen? Because there's so many late night entertainers, no one will care. It's like, oh yeah, Jimmy Kimmel had a Tesla bot on there that night. I don't care. But what would be kind of that public venue that would get everyone talking about it? I think you're sort of right that when people start doing TikToks of these things and they start spreading around, then everyone begins to realize this really is a thing.
Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that I love the matrix, and I love that you guys are building this comparative matrix. I'm assuming it's going to evolve over time. A couple of things to think about and to kind of run things through a filter that that could be blind spots for these companies is anybody can do a demo. If you think of like even Nikola doing demos of electric trucks and so forth. And we found out that there was more problems behind the curtain, but things that can't be faked out are things like power consumption, and which could kill any one of these competitors. Like they may have designed something that doesn't have a useful day in a factory or even a useful hour, but they could do a 30-second YouTube clip and maybe fool some people, not you guys, but just fool people. So I think power consumption is kind of one big category to think about. Is there a way to evaluate the offering? Maybe it's motorized functions and it's the onboard compute and kind of looking at that. And then the other thing is supply chain. It's another thing that these companies, they may not have the wherewithal behind them of like, have they designed something that can scale? And then it's two-parter. Have they designed something that, DFX wise can scale? And then two, do they have the supply chain behind what they're doing? And are they serious about, supply chain? What is their model? Are they building their own, are they insourcing it? Or are they outsourcing? Like, what are they what are they doing? And these are just two areas where I think Tesla's got a massive advantage, you know, in power consumption and supply chain. So just a couple of categories I may want to consider.
Well, yeah, what I might think of is that there's like either some sort of test or competition. So usually when you start seeing these different organizations that come together, they start coming up with some sort of standard test. So in the area of robotics, depending on the kind of robot they have, the RIA and others have put together different tests for speeds, because everyone was able to claim, oh, our robot is like so fast or something like that. It's like, okay, here's an actual benchmark test you have to do. And they go through. And so for like the scare robots, it's a type of pick and place test they have to do, you know, so many times and so many picks and everything else that gives you an idea. It's like, oh, okay, that's where I need it to be. I could see a similar kind of thing where you have, you know, some simple tests that you would like the bots to go through. You know, part of it would be like a speed test. Part of it would be like, you know, an endurance test, as you talk about. It's like, let's see, you know, whether it really can do 8 hours. So just like an Olympic Games, and you have almost like a decathlon. So there's going to be some sprints in there. There's going to be some long distance. There's going to be some things requiring maybe fine dexterity or lifting something kind of heavy. And then you could imagine, you know, some kind of middle distance thing where occasionally you're having to output a lot of energy, but then there are times you could be quiet. So it's quite possible that might be the best way to do it, is that there are these standard tests. And then you would say, okay, what was the rating? You know, is it a 4-star rating? Is it a 9.2? You know, what's the formula going to be when you come out with it? And you can look at the various categories to tell, because you're right, the power consumption is going to be very key. And that even if you have low power consumption, that's great. But if you got a small battery pack, it may only be able to go like 2 hours. So you're thinking, well, you know, is that worth having? But then it might be yes, but it charges up very quickly. So you may look at these different scenarios that the usability of it over like an 8 or 10 hour period, you know, is it 85% usable over like a 10-hour shift? Because as we know, it's like a quote 8-hour day is not necessarily 8 hours. It's over a longer period of that, because breaks usually are not paid for. So depending upon how that's structured, you might want to look at that to see how they're best going to fit in those various scenarios. So I'm thinking that there's going to be a variety of standards that are coming up, and I've already got it in the back of my head of what some of them would be, and some of it would be like a test like this. So come up with these different categories, and I think it's something that should be kind of crowdsourced a little bit, where everyone sort of talks about what would be the reasonable tests and benchmarks we would like to see them do. So, you know, there'll be some kind of weightlifting. There'll be some sort of, you know, stamina tests, speed tests, endurance tests, reliability tests, of course, charging time, you can imagine. And then there may be other standards that they want to have, you know, right down to the charging standard. You know, what kind of adapters are you going to have for these things? So we're just going to let them all have whatever they want, or is there going to be some sort of uniform charging standard for them? The other thing that's come up is that a lot of the bots seem to have, you know, we know on the Tesla bot, they came up with the LED that kind of goes the outline of the face, and it's able to be different colors. Well, what did the colors mean? Good question. Probably isn't any standard out there yet. And we know that Sanctuary has something. I think Figure has something, Aptronics. They all have some sort of LED lights that might be on the chest or somewhere else that are supposed to indicate the status that it's in. Now I can guess the status, I guess, that it's like, I guess if it's green, it's on, but it's like there's different colors that you'd want for being on. One would be like an autonomous mode versus a telerobotic mode, or you know, maybe a service mode that you'd want to know about it, or an idle or a charging. And there probably has to be some standardization there. So when someone decides to work with different bots, it's very clear that's what those signals mean. And of course, there's already those light poles that you see in factories where there is already kind of a standardization of what all those things are supposed to mean. It's just that I don't think they have enough categories in there for the human bot. So you would need to come up with maybe another standard that's built on top of that. Your thoughts, Jeff? Because I think you know a lot about the different kind of, you know, ISO and DIN standards, and you know.
I mean, I think there's going to need to be a whole, like there's human resources for companies and for factories. You're going to need a kind of a fleet management bot resources. There'll be a whole software ecosystem for managing. You know, how do you onboard a bot? How is a bot performing? So fleet management, I think, is going to be another big thing. But I was just looking at your I love these matrices. I think you guys are off to a good start, and I just think a couple of areas would be around just making sure, like, the things that can't get faked out, like, to me would be, power consumption, if it's properly evaluated, and then supply chain, really going and digging into that.
And I don't think we even have it in there because that's like kind of questionable to us right now. And we just sort of put in what we're kind of known. And the other problem is everyone on their website presents slightly different information. So there isn't really a standard form. And CERN put together what I call like the baseball card for all of them, where you can go through and get the stats, how the height, the weight, and everything else. But then the way they present the lifting capacity or the runtime capacity, they all kind of shade it a little bit different. It's Tesla, I think, is just like 8 hours, and others are, so many hours within a particular day with, a certain amount of charging in there and everything else. So it would be nice to standardize that. And the RIA, which basically is the umbrella organization for industrial robots, they put together a lot of standards like that. So when you look at a robot spec sheet coming from either FANUC or KUKA or ABB or any one of those things, generally the numbers are presented the same way. So you really can do an apples to apples comparison. And I agree. It's like right now, this is a good start. And that's the first thing we said. It's like, well, we're going to put it out there and we are going to show it as work in progress. Rather than waiting for this to be perfect, we're just like, let's get it out there so everyone knows. Let's get the feedback. Let's figure out what columns we need to put in there. And we actually, the spreadsheet that's out here right now that I'm looking at was, I think, updated already 3 or 4 times since CERN first put it out, based on some feedback already. And one of them was like, we added a column which was commercial focus, for example, whether they were just purely research or whether they really were commercial focused.
And that came from Brett. So, I've got a question for you, Scott. So one of the things that Tesla says that they are really far ahead of everyone else, right, is real world AI. This ability to navigate the real world, to actually know what the real world, right? That's a door, that's a doorknob, that's stairs, that's a fire hydrant, those kind of things. And then know the space is occupied, know that they can maneuver around it. To what extent is, we're talking about today, the ChatGPT moment for FSD and bots. To what extent is Tesla's efforts in FSD going to be an advantage for bots and this real world AI capability? What's your thoughts on that?
Okay. So first, everyone is aware of Sora. That came out Friday, and how that kind of, was that Thursday? I'm trying to remember. I think it was Thursday, wasn't it? And how it sort of blew everyone away with the capability that's there. And when John Gibbs saw that, he did a video on his thoughts about it, because he thought this is something that Tesla was getting ready to do, is being able to create frame by frame movies of the future from the vantage point of FSD. And so he kind of speculated about that, talked about it, posted it to X, and he got a reply from Elon on that. And the reply was basically, his speculation was really quite close. Which was like amazing, and it seems that Elon is actually tracking a lot of the thoughts that John has in this space pretty closely, or there's people in Tesla that are looking at it, and then when it's interesting, they bring it to Elon's attention, because he then filled in some of the pieces that we didn't know, and that we had seen from the last AI day that they were already trying to predict the frames in the future, I think up to 10 seconds, if I recall. So they're bringing the video in, and they've been trained to kind of get an idea. It's like, this is what you expect to see. This is what the coming road conditions are going to be. Plan for it. And Elon said, yeah, we've been doing that, already doing that. It already takes real world physics into account. And they could do way more. It's just that they don't have the compute to give it the video samples. So it sounds that right now they know how to do it. They can probably do the same thing as Sora. But the question is, do they really need to do it to accomplish what they are trying to do, was to get FSD going? And second, they may not have the compute, even if they had all the videos to go in there. So that is a more bullish signal. Both seeing Sora at first was like, wow, that means they probably can solve this real world AI problem more easily than we thought, because it appears Sora understands physics, and Elon confirmed that they understand physics, and it's just, we can do it too, kind of thing. So again, it's a very bullish signal. It may be.
I want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Just very quickly, because just to clarify, I think what Elon said was that they don't understand physics, right?
Right. Okay. He may.
Yeah, Tesla understands the physics, and that's
Physics.
one thing for you to just type in a sentence and say, show me a video of this train driving through a leaf, but it's not, there's no physics involved in that. They don't know what's going on.
Right.
Okay. Step two, what was really interesting about Elon's reply was saying that we are compute constrained today. That's why we've not yet done video generation for like what Sora's doing for fun, right? Movie.
Right.
But we should be not compute constrained by the end of this year.
Exactly.
And then in a separate tweet, he said that we will do movie generation once we've solved FSD, unsupervised FSD. So all of that sounds like they're going to have enough compute constraint now, and that he thinks that it can be done by the end of the year.
Yeah, and it might be that the reason we're not seeing more from Optimus is it's a question of compute constraint, and it's been more or less dedicated towards solving FSD. Now, in some ways, I think it's good that they're not trying to train FSD on data clips beyond what FSD needs to know. The last thing I want is when we're driving down the road with FSD and it's been trained on everything and it starts imagining unicorns. Okay, we don't want to train it on anything like that. We want to make sure that what the movies it's going to be creating of what's coming up have everything to do with driving, and not with some weird space fantasy opera or something like that, which is, Sora obviously is able to do a lot more than that. So I think you do want to limit the training set a little bit. So if they start broadening it out, which they're going to have to for Optimus, you have to be careful that it's not now going to be imagining things like, suddenly imagining an industrial robot or something like that appearing on the street corner, because it's in its training set, because it's been learning what things look like in the factory. So you may have a strong reason to make sure you have kind of separate branches going on what your training data is going to be for the two. The fact that they're able to understand physics, and the thing to point out is let's really be careful when we define what we mean by physics. It does not mean it understands F equals ma and Newton's laws of motion. Okay. That is just how we've been able to figure out how we explain the universe, is we come up with these equations. However, every one of us, almost from the moment we start walking and interacting with the world, get an innate sense of physics and how it works. So when you go out in the yard and you play catch with someone, you're solving a physics problem. That's the projectile motion problem, except you're not solving a differential equation or anything like that to catch the ball. You just kind of know where the ball is going to be by looking a little bit of its trajectory. And of course, when you want to throw it, you already get an idea of what you need to do. So that's like what we mean by, understanding real world physics, those different examples. And so by getting enough training data, the car is sort of understanding things like persistence, that there's an object, it gets occluded, I expect the object to show up. And if it's a cyclist and the cyclist is going at a certain speed, I expect the cyclist should appear, if it's keeping on that trajectory, about now. And of course, if you were to be doing that heuristically, and we had a set of cameras and we identified there's a cyclist there and we could do the kinematics of the motion, we could run the calculation of exactly when it should show up over there. That's one way of doing it. But we as humans, we don't do that. We aren't running it through it. We just have an innate sense, hey, he should be showing up about now, shouldn't he? We just get this gut feeling. And when it doesn't show up after a certain period of time, we just kind of make the assumption, I must have turned or gone somewhere else. He kind of disappeared. So that's sort of the same thing that's going on. It's not, let's say, not getting caught up on the real nitty gritty of solving equations of motion or anything like that. But again, the same kind of feeling that we have of understanding what it's like to interact with the world, the expectations of what's going to come. So that's sort of what I read as their meaning of understanding real world physics.
Is it a real advantage for Tesla?
Oh yeah. I think everything. Yes. Well, It could be if they have that capability. When you start turning it loose for the bots themselves, then that means, oh, okay, we know how to solve physics for driving. Then we can be able to solve it for anything else. It's just a question of having enough training data and compute to go with it. And that means you will understand way more than just the normal physics of how a car drives and pedestrians moving around and everything else. But it may come down to, like, think about, it's not important for FSD to understand how to throw a football. Okay, the only reason that it might need to understand that is that if for some reason people throwing footballs over the highway is a thing, and it has to understand when it sees a projectile like that whether it's a hazard or not. But normally it doesn't. But for the bots, we might expect, we want to be able to play catch with our bots. So that's something that we want to train them on and give them enough to give that kind of understanding.
So I can see that many of these bots can do pick and place in a factory, right? You put them in a certain location, pick this, move this there. Great. They all can do that. But only Tesla bot might be able to say, hey, go to the supermarket and buy me milk and bring it back. So it goes out your door, walks down the stairs, walks along the block, knows to wait for the stop sign to change, the walk sign signals, goes to the supermarket, picks up the milk, pays for it, comes back. Like, it could do that versus none of the other bots would be able to do this if they don't. Could they? Could you just feed them YouTube videos and teach them? But probably not, right? Because
that's a good question. Yeah, we don't know. We don't know. And you're right. It could be some kind of advantage. And how does that transfer from understanding how to drive to understanding how to be a pedestrian? I mean, for humans, there is a little bit of transference there, right? Because we understand, it's kind of the same rules of the road. But in one case, it's like you stay on the sidewalk and you only use crosswalks. In another, you stay on the road and you don't go on the sidewalk. And sort of understanding those two things, and how easy is it to make sure it understands the difference in those kind of contexts. As humans, we've been able to figure it out. So I don't see why there would be any reason why you couldn't also do that with the bots. But you're right, that the fact that you've got this kind of real world ability for navigation for the car might be able to scale up pretty well from the standpoint of a pedestrian.
Yeah, that's the exact question I was going to ask. Is and back to my compute / data question, is there, like, this moment that we're having with 12 and it being neural nets and self-discovering of how to navigate, is that crossing over to, because it seems like it is, but for the audience, can you elaborate on just what it means, on what's occurred with the software here and how it's going to cross over to the bots
in V12?
Yeah, exactly.
I think part of it is that being able to simulate a task ahead of time is very important. We always do that. We imagine in our head what it is we are about to do, and then we execute it. So there's that part of that kind of that planning. I'm thinking about going over and grabbing my mouse, and now I'm envisioning what it's going to be like to grab my mouse. And as I do it, I'm just trying to see, are there going to be any particular problems or issues? And then I execute the whole thing. So you're always looking a little bit in the future, but you don't have to look too far in the future. That's going to be when you're kind of chaining all these tasks together to be able to complete something more complex. But it's always broken down in a series of steps, and you need to execute those things. And when you execute it, if your plan deviates from the reality, then you have to stop and reassess and say, oh, okay, is a slight correction I have to do, or have the facts of the situation changed? And so FSD is doing a lot of that already, is that when it's driving down the road, it has a certain expectation of what all the cars are going to be doing in the next 10 seconds. And it's like, this is a probability of what it should be. And anything that deviates a little bit out of that thing tells us there's something wrong and we need to reassess. So if suddenly a car goes out of its lane, suddenly and unexpectedly, then that tells you, I wasn't expecting to see that. There's something wrong. I need to do braking or need to intervene or do something else. It would sort of be the same thing with the bot. So if you look at what the figure bot was doing, it's like, I'm going to go ahead and put the Keurig cup into the coffee maker, and it has expectation of how it's going to go in there. And then it goes and does it, and it's like, didn't go in quite right. and it keeps on trying again and again until it gets it right. So you'll have all those things that it knows what the goal is, and it understands that something is a little bit wrong and amiss, and then needs to correct and correct and correct again. And so that ability to predict the outcome is very important, and that seems to be the indication I'm seeing for V12 is that's what they're doing, is they're creating these frames of expectation of what's going to be happening in the future, and they're probably doing enough of them to kind of look at the possibilities. Is because the thing about predicting the future, it can have a lot of different outcomes, but you can predict the future with certain confidence of, well, these are the expected outcomes that will more than likely going to happen. And then you just decide whether you're sort of happy with those outcomes. And so long as you're within there, you'll say everything is okay. But then if you are starting to see an outcome very different, then you would do something else. And so these, the ability to train these is very, doesn't take very much noise, I guess you could say, to be able to show potential different paths that could happen, in your future timeline, how things would deviate. But hopefully, most of them will kind of coalesce or sort of stay within a certain timeline or expectations of what you're going to see transpiring as you go forward. And it's only way in the future that things would get, very, very different from the expectations. But we know that, like with weather, it's really easy to predict tomorrow's weather. It's not so easy to predict next month's weather.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Scott.
Okay, so we're talking about bots since we have Scott Walter here. Scott, tell me, okay, so instead of going through each of the different bot manufacturers, we've done videos on each one of them. Let's talk about Tesla bot and what you think are the competitive advantages it has. Okay, let's not use the word competitive. Like we said earlier, every one of these bots is going to succeed. What is going to differentiate Tesla bot? What advantages do they have over everyone else? Like, how do you evaluate bots, but also not just bots, right? We talked about AI, right? The brains. We talked about, we have not talked about manufacturing, of course. They have the ability to do that. There's things about business model, but just everything else. Let's walk me through each of the criteria that you would evaluate for a successful bot company.
Well, I think that the first thing is deep pockets. All right, so they definitely have enough money just to keep going. So that's the first and most important thing. The others are on kind of shoestring budgets right now, which in some cases could be a little bit of an advantage, because being mean and lean can have advantages over to, you have such a big stockpile of money, you don't really care about it, and your capital spend is very, very, very inefficient. But Tesla, right away we know, well, they're in it for the long run because they can easily fund it. They've got a really good bench, and let's say a really good farm system. They can pull talent from anywhere within not just Tesla, but all the related companies that are there as well. It's so easy to attract them. So and I hate doing this because I'm from Boston, but the Yankees are perennially really, really good for a couple of reasons. One, they have a really good farm system, right? They're able to attract talent. All the free agents are able to bring in really easy. And part of the reason they're able to bring them in really easily is because everyone wants to play for the Yankees sometime in their career, right? So you have to look at it that way, that is just like this huge advantage. The leadership is pretty good, but at the same time, they do keep, which is it's almost like an oxymoron to say that this entrepreneurial kind of mentality within the organization. At this point, they should be bloated and bureaucratic and inefficient, but they're not. So they still kind of have that mentality of that we're just going to keep moving forward. Of course, the access to different technologies within not just Tesla, but also outside. So for manufacturing, for compute, all that is there. Which gives them a huge advantage. Another thing is they have the built-in pilot plant. So most of the others, the demonstrations they're doing are kind of lab demonstrations, and they have to go outside to find a customer. Whereas Tesla, it's very clear. The end customers right there, they understand the problem. So it might be easier to understand what are the real world challenges. And finally, it's like they know how to design for manufacture. Now, it's not to say that the others don't know how to, because design for manufacturing is something that's ingrained in all engineers when you go into engineering school. It's kind of drummed into you to think about what it's going to be like to building. But there's a big difference between understanding the theory behind it and having actually had to practice it several times. And I won't put words in Jeff's mouth, but I think he would probably agree. It's one thing to read the textbook about all this stuff. It's another thing to have lived it a few times and realize that, there's some other things they didn't teach me in engineering school about what we need to do to actually make these lines efficient and how you scale and everything else. So Tesla has gone through that so many different times that it should be fairly easy for them. And so I think that's their big advantage. The others, that's going to be probably the hard part, is when it comes to scaling. So even if they have a really good prototype design, they're going to have to figure out, how do we scale this thing up? And Jeff, did I put words in your mouth?
No, it's absolutely right. And I think it's half of these companies may not be able to scale at all. I mean, it's that kind of, it could be that serious, or it could extend their timelines dramatically, or take their cost structures up where they're not competitive.
From all the bots that you've looked at, Scott, who has the most advanced, let's call it prototype, right? Humanoid form.
Humanoid form. So do we want to say the humanoid form from head to toes? Because someone may have a slight advantage in one part of the anatomy than the other, and I guess what we have to do is look at it from head to toe. And I would think that Tesla probably right now has the one that's the most advanced head to toes. And a lot of it is just because it's, they're calling it Gen 2, but in some ways it feels almost like Gen 3 because, there was Bumblebee before that. So they've gone through a lot of refinements. Figure at this point just has the Figure 1. They will, I'm sure, be working pretty hard on their next generation one. And when we see that, then we may see that there's a lot of refinements and improvements there that will help. So when I look at Figure and I look at Tesla, they have kind of the complete body solution. They can walk, they can move around, they've got full hands and arms and everything else. Where a lot of the other bots are missing one major part of the body anatomy. So they may be really good from the torso up, but they're not walking, or they may be really good at walking, but they don't really have full arms yet, or they have arms but no hands. And it also comes down to how close they are mimicking the human form. And this is something that Suzanne Gildert kind of stressed pretty well. She thinks it's very, very important to make sure, I asked her, okay, why 5 fingers? Why the 3 knuckles? Why is your hand so human-like? And hers was like, is because it has to be. It's like there's no debate. You don't want a 3-fingered hand. You don't want fewer knuckles. It's got to be as close to the human hand because it's got to interact with a world built by humans. Okay, and this is the same thing we're hearing from all of the CEOs, that the reason why the humanoid form is because the world was built by humans for humans. So doorknobs are designed for humans, for the human hand. So the kitchen appliances, everything is human hands. Yes, you could redesign those things for a different humanoid form, but that means you have to redesign the entire world that we live in. So it makes sense to have something thought closer. And they're trying to capture a lot of telerobotic data. So the closer you're there, the better. So most of them have done that. And yet Boston Dynamics, they finally decided to put a hand on Atlas. And it's 3 fingers and it's 2 knuckles, and the knuckles are double jointed. And they're all lined up, and it doesn't really have a thumb. It has opposing fingers that can sort of act as a thumb as necessary, and it doesn't map, so, but they decided that solution works, and it works with a particular problem they were working on, and maybe some others, but it doesn't seem general purpose enough. So that's where some of them may be missing. It is thinking we don't have to be necessarily faithful to the entire human anatomy. But I would argue you would. Now, there are others that are coming very close. Apollo seems to have something. Sanctuary, Phoenix, they don't have they have a design for walking, but they haven't demonstrated that yet. So like I say, they're very good from the torso up, but they're missing the lower part. Agility still doesn't have full hands. But they literally built their robot from the ground up, meaning they focused on walking way before they focused on anything else. 1X will be interesting. They're starting to show things of their new Neo bot. Their Eve bot has partial legs. It basically looks like a bot on a hoverboard. So the legs can bend up and down, but they don't have feet. It was using wheels, but Neo is going to actually be walking, and Eve has more like claws as opposed to real hands, but Neo has real hands. So we'll have to see, what theirs looks like, but we haven't seen anything yet. Boston Dynamics, like I just said, is they put hands on it, but they didn't put the right hands on. So, and then when we look at a lot of the Chinese bot manufacturers, their main focus, and one of them out there is actually called Walker, is walking. So it seems almost like the China put together something similar to the DARPA Sea Challenge in the US, where, they want to start building bots and are almost creating a competition amongst Chinese industry to create these humanoid form bots. And it seems like walking is like the first thing that they want everyone to see. They say, show us that you can make them walk. And if you can walk, then we'll start talking about, the rest of it.
Well, the best example somebody told me was if you create a humanoid bot as closely as possible to the humanoid form, like the hand specifically, it can go to a Home Depot and use everything that they sell there.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And as we know, one of the things that Sanctuary is doing is they have what they call the abduction and adduction on the hands. And they're so proud of it. They actually took a clip out of the video you and I did with Suzanne, where I asked her if they could do the live long and prosper Vulcan salute. So for all those who are Trekkies, that salute that the Vulcans make, especially Spock. And that's a really difficult thing for even some humans to do that abduction movement. So clenching, that's very easy. That's, just grasping something, but now you're moving your fingers in 90 degrees from the other direction, and the other bots can't do that. Question is, how important is that? For some things it is, certainly if you want to play the piano, we know it's that, but you don't need to play the piano on the factory floor. And the question is, are there some operations or things like that on the factory floor that need that? And maybe not, because when you think about on the factory floors, a lot of times people have to wear PPE anyways, personal protection equipment, like bulky gloves and stuff like that to do with a lot of these tasks. And that doesn't necessarily give you the dexterity that you would need for like playing the piano or doing something else. But there probably are some fine motions. It may be that some people say, yeah, in the kitchen, using some utensils, it really helps to be able to have that extra movement in the fingers. So it's going to be something important in the future, I believe, and all of them, I believe, will have that in the future. The big question is it important to focus on that right now? And that's what engineers do. They compromise. They try to figure out what problems do we need to solve now. And I'm a strong believer of what is known as Pareto's law, the 80-20 law, is focus on the 80%. You can get the 80% accomplished with 20% of the effort. But that last 20% is going to take 80% of the effort and the cost and everything else. And a lot of companies get so focused on how are we going to solve that last 20% before they even attempt to solve the first 80%. They're sitting there coming up with these designs and just arguing this we have to do. When the best thing is like, let's just solve the first 80%. And along the way, we're going to learn something. And what we might learn is how we solve that last 20%. And when we solve that last 20%, let's attack it 80% at a time. You just keep on doing that Zeno's paradox kind of thing. It's just getting closer and closer to the finish line. And so, that's what you're saying. Of course, the bots are not perfect. And again, I don't know if this is getting overworn and cliche. I've heard it so much the past month, but I'm going to say it again. These bots are the worst they will ever be. They just get better from here. That's what a lot of people said about the Apple Vision Pro as well. It's like this product is the worst it will ever be. It's just going to get better and better and better. So when you begin to look at that, that's like, yes, what they're doing is they are kind of literally making a benchmark here and saying, this is what we want to do. Let's get it out there. Let's prove its utility. And then from that, we'll iterate, and iterate. But if you're going to focus on the home bot right now, it might take you longer to actually get to there. If you're only focused on the home bot, you've got to find something in the middle.
Let me ask the panel this question. So at the earnings call, you had Elon say that by next year, hopefully, we'll have some number of humanoid test Optimus being shipped. So how did you react when you heard that statement? And relatedly, do you think that we now need to wait till next year before there's a ChatGPT moment for Tesla bots so that people will get excited about investing in Tesla? Or do you think demos or some other event could still happen this year before that next year? Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I think as a leader of a company, you've got to put an aggressive date in front of your team where you know you're stretching them and you know that you're stretching your whole business. But in terms of like what they're financially risking, maybe another thing that we'll soon find out. But yeah, I think you got to ship something. You got to get something going to get the whole process going, to give people a point of convergence. So I think that's why he's one of the reasons he's doing it. I think he truly believes that that we'll have some useful capability. And I think the key metric, the ChatGPT moment, is when a bot displaces a person permanently. Like, it could be the first 100 that they make. It doesn't have to be in large scale, but it's like, okay, we've now displaced employee number 1 at a Tesla factory, and it's permanent. Like it's somebody who is managing all the cardboard in the warehouse, or somebody that's again, I firmly believe that these roles are going to start mostly in the perimeters of factories and move their way in, with some exception. But yeah, I think that moment is when it's not like, oh, we're doing a demo. Look, they're in the factory. I mean, they showed a bot in the factory, for AI Day for the first, in September of 2022. It's going to be something serious though. Like, we've now displaced an employee. This bot is permanently there. It's not going anywhere. And we've got it. And now you're scaling from there. That's real scale when you've permanently displaced an employee. So I think that's the key moment.
The first thing is I almost want to put it up again to the panel, is that when you heard Elon say that they're going to ship by 2025, did you think shipping outside of Tesla or somehow within Tesla? Because usually when you hear the term product used by someone 3 times, referring to Optimus as a product, you think of something that is going to be sold outside. And when you say shipping, you think of something that's outside. But you could also think of it as like an internal product that's going from one department to another. So I was a bit perplexed by that and wondering, do they really think it's going to be ready to ship? Where would it be shipping? I do think that before that shipping happens, that's not going to be the ChatGPT moment. It's going to be sooner than that. It's going to be sometime by the middle of the year, where there will be some sort of impressive demonstration, whether it's going to be live or maybe it's going to be a video that may happen. And the only thing is it's coming down to reading the tea leaves. And I think it was about 4 or 5 days ago, Elon put out a post right around the time that Sora came out. And that was Starman, right? The image of Starman with a kind of mechanical toy robot floating in space over, with Grok emblazoned on its chest. So do you remember that meme that Elon put out there? And also that bot, that Grok bot, was wearing shades. So it's like, oh, okay. So, and also it was the image from there where underneath on the bottom of it said, "Don't panic." So if you remember with the Starman, so it's like right there, you're looking at it, "Don't panic." What do you mean by "don't panic"? And there's a Tesla in the image, and there's a robot with Grok on it, and there's some shade. So it probably might be that, okay, we know everyone's making these announcements, but we're about to make an announcement of our own. I don't know how imminent that is. And I would assume that has something to do with the integration of Grok into some of the Tesla products. And based on that, the first guess would be probably into Optimus first, because everyone else is sort of integrating those LLMs into their bots. So, what's taking Tesla? Why aren't they doing that? They haven't done that yet. And would it make more sense to do it into Optimus before actually putting it into Tesla vehicles? I would think the priority would be more Optimus. I mean, as much as I would love to have Grok in my Tesla, I don't think it's mature enough right now. So, in some ways, but it would certainly be better than the current speech to text that's in there. Hopefully, so I see that's an indication something's coming. Every time Elon puts out a meme like that, it's like 2 months later we all realize, oh, that's what he meant by it. So I tried to look at it again. I feel like I'm a criminologist here, trying to figure out exactly what is being signaled.
I just don't think that's
I
going to
hope
move.
you were right, Scott.
I just don't think it's going to move the needle, though. We had a video in, controls out demo of V12 in August, and it did nothing. So I agree with all your points. I agree with Grok integration in the bot and the car. I think the car would be first, though. But I think the moment is when there's actual real displacement of labor, and until then, everything's a demo. But that's just my opinion.
I completely agree with you, Jeff. Scott, I wish Elon memes were an indicator or a breadcrumb. Unfortunately, at this point, I have just come to realize he finds something humorous or entertaining and he reposts it and doesn't give credit to whoever the original content creator is, and so I hope that is the case. But I agree with Jeff. I think it's going to take actual adoption of a technology to have, quote, a ChatGPT moment. We're not going to have that until there's something that people find useful. And what is that? $20 a month or using it for free is completely different than $200 a month or buying a robot. So
Yeah.
I'm being patient.
Yeah, and I think what Jeff has basically done is he sort of defined really well useful work, or doing something useful, which is what Elon said, something useful in the factory. And useful in the factory, suddenly that job is gone now. It's being done by the robot, and it's not coming back. And so that is, I agree, that's something. So we've been looking for something in the factory that looks useful, that they would demonstrate publicly. And when you do that, I would agree with Jeff. That's when it moves the needle. That's when everyone realizes, oh, this isn't a party trick anymore. This isn't just moving Legos around and doing nothing. This is really doing useful work. This is going to affect margins. Oh, what if it starts displacing more jobs? What does that mean? And so that will start to move the needle. And then the question is whether everyone believes that they can then be sold outside and go into the home. That's when you get your Uber bull case, right? But if you're just saying, oh, that's going to help margins, and you remember right now, Wall Street is just fixated in the margins. Oh, the margins are going down, 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 down. What's Tesla going to do about that? You see that, and suddenly you realize, oh, that is going to help them on the margins.
Well, okay. Yes, I think I agree with everything you're saying. Unfortunately, that's true. But let me just play another scenario out, right? Which is a ChatGPT moment that happened for AI was the moment when people realized that AI was way more advanced than they realized, right? And it did require them to log into ChatGPT.com and OpenAI.com and ChatGPT and play with it.
I see Herbert's unmuted, but I can't hear him. Is he speaking?
I'm speaking. Can people hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah,
I can.
I can hear you, Herbert. Xander, you may need to drop down and come back up.
So, so that's the moment when people realize that this is real and it can actually, it's a powerful and strong, and it was so powerful, the demonstration of it. And of course, it's a difference is that 100 million people used it, that investors started to throw money at the miracle, the Magnificent Seven for AI, except Tesla. So what can happen for the bot, though, is do you need to wait until there's 1 million bots? And I know you didn't say 1 million, physically doing physical work for people, or 1 million bots at home and people can interact with them? Maybe not. The difference is that, the bot is humanoid. So if you see this humanoid that you can talk to, right? So now you've got Digit actually did a demo where I think NVIDIA has partnered with 12 robotic companies. Digit's one of them. And they did a demo where you can actually say, hey, Digit, pick up the box that is the same color as Darth Vader's lightsaber and move it to the tallest column. And because it was using, the LLM, it understood that Darth Vader's lightsaber is red. It knew to pick up the red box and it knew to move it there. And you could talk to it, right? So if you can talk to the bot and it talks back to you and it's humanoid and it can do things, do you need to wait until it's actually doing useful work in a factory? Do you need to wait till you have thousands of them? Or can you already imagine very easily, the investor can imagine easily, oh my God, this thing can do this. It can do many jobs. I'm going to invest now. I mean, it could be like anything that excites the consciousness of a consumer. And I think that this is so like the demo is so powerful, right? It's just what I can talk to this humanoid bot. It's much more powerful than anything we've ever seen before, any kind of consumer product before. It is emotionally connected to it, and you can immediately understand that it can do what humans can do, and therefore, you don't need to sell me that this thing is going to be sold in the billions once you see it in a certain number. That's just obviously an optimistic point of view, but there might be some truth to what I'm saying.
Herbert, it's just like it's going to be like any gradient. I think there's going to be, there's going to be investors like that you and I have talked about that are doing it now, and there's that's going to be a very small percentage, and it's going to grow over time. But I think in terms of like getting to the masses, I mean, ChatGPT had been around. There's ChatGPT 1 and 2 and 3, and it didn't have that that larger moment until GPT 3 or 3.5. So yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a gradient of investors that get ushered in over time versus kind of like an all-in kind of boom. But information does travel faster now, and so anything could change. So I just think that it's not going to be an all at once. It's going to be very early investors, then a next group, then a next group, and eventually it may grow to a much larger scale.
All right, let's welcome Sat here. Sat actually was one of the first people to receive version 12. Tell us what you're experiencing so far.
So far it's really good overall. Much more human-like, and easier and more comfortable. And even I posted it on my account, but I was going through the construction area, and naturally, like it's really hard to tell. But when there's a curve, like humanly, you naturally want to stop because the inertia is too strong. The car was doing the same thing, and I think it could see the ground somehow because it was avoiding the bumps from going too fast. It would slow down. So usually I notice because I'm used to that area, but yeah, it was pretty human like. And but today, I don't know if it's because of a ton of rain. There was a ton of rain going on, and then there's at least 3 accidents I went by, and one of them it just stopped. I kind of let it go as much as possible. It wasn't able to go through because there was a car literally perpendicular onto the right shoulder, blocking half the lane. I think it crashed into another car and then went to the side. And there's a lot of traffic on the left, so it just ended up stopping in the lane. But there's also like so much rain that there's like puddles on the sides of the freeway. So it's not perfect by any means, but it's significantly better in terms of the ride quality.
How poetic! How poetic! So you're complaining that FSD version 12 didn't do a perfect, like it did what it stopped, versus when it saw an accident by human pilots crashing into each other.
Yeah, that's the funny part. So it's definitely not. Yeah, it's definitely stopping and everything. So I don't know, the legacy media trying to pin FSD as a cause of a lot of accidents. I just don't see it happening because it would just stop. So all the drunk driving stuff, it would just literally stop. It wouldn't keep on going. So
Zach, can you also highlight the how it changed lanes with the truck?
yeah, it was really interesting because first of all, it was a really nice ride because it wasn't switching lanes. Even if there was no traffic, basically, oftentimes it would kind of switch lanes and it wouldn't stay in it. So when it did stay in the lane, I noticed a pickup truck, not the pickup truck, the big truck.
Semi.
Uh, yeah, it moved into the lane that I was in further down, and I mean it's quite a bit down, and it was going at a slower pace, so it was gradually catching up to it. But then the second that it turned on the hazard light, the signal turn went on and went to the left, and but it was blocking the view from me. And then when I was passing it up, I can see that there was a car up the hill. Yeah, rain is not very good to LA drivers, I think. It was up in the hill, and there was a cop already tending to the accident, but it was basically moving to the left because of the truck, but it was also avoiding the accident. I don't know if it saw it or not, but it timing wise, it definitely avoided it. So instead of going to the right lane where it would have been closer to the accident. So I don't know if it's a coincidence, but it seems like it's avoiding like a health hazard or safety hazard and reacting to the truck, which is really interesting because I didn't notice the timing of it until I reviewed the video. That the second the hazard lights went on, the signal went on, and I wouldn't have noticed it either in that sense because uh, I would probably slow down, but I didn't notice the hazard lights, and then it didn't occur to me to as a human to turn that signal on because I wasn't noticing. It was pretty dark at night too, so it can see a lot better than I can, that's for sure. At nighttime and it's raining pretty hard, yeah, and then there's fog going in and out, so it's definitely a lot more. For me, at least, I feel a lot more at peace when it's raining and then FSD is running.
Yeah, I've pinned the video to the space for you guys.
Yeah, Sad. I got a couple questions because here in Florida we get a lot of rain, unlike California, and I've noticed that FSD is really timid around puddles, and I get a lot of puddling around where I am. So when I try to leave my neighborhood, sometimes it just doesn't know which way to go, and actually will go the wrong way. I assume because it may be looking at that as like literally a body of water that has no idea how deep it is. I was wondering if you're noticing some of that puddling avoidance. And the other thing to kind of follow up on that is that FSD is always really good for me in the middle of the day, but in the morning or in the evening when the sun is low and you get long shadows and stuff like that, that's when I tend to see like more phantom braking, it literally being kind of afraid of its own shadow or other shadows, or that the light is just causing so many different problems. It seems like, oh, it's just horrible. It's in a bad mood right now. Not that FSD should be in a bad mood, but you get that feeling. And then when the conditions are really good, it's just like phenomenal. Are you sort of seeing the same thing with V12, that when you have good conditions, it's just absolutely great. And then when conditions start to deteriorate, that's when some of the problems start to crop up?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't think it's that much different. Or
Did we lose Sat, or is it just me?
can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, you're back.
Yeah, and I don't think it's that different. But I feel like it's generally better. But the amount of rain that we had is quite a bit, and the puddle thing that you're talking about, it is more hesitant and more cautious about it. But like when I was getting off of the ramp today, it was literally covering the entire road. Like the puddle was the entire road. So it stopped there, and it actually didn't go forward, like creep a little bit. So I tapped it twice to creep a little forward, and then it went. So when it's that amount of water, I think it becomes more hesitant because literally your whole shoe would have been soaked. That's how deep the puddle was. And I'll try to post one later, but when the cars would pass by, it would literally do that wave to the side, to the sidewalk. That's how much water was there. So I'd rather be more cautious. I'm not sure how it's reading that. I feel like that's a little bit better than the 11. But I didn't encounter too many of those situations with the 11 because of the weather in LA typically isn't this bad. So you probably have a better assessment of it when you get V12 and try it than I would, but I felt like it was still moving as long as I tapped it a little bit, because I can understand the hesitancy that's in there, because it's literally covering the whole. It's like a pond
Yeah,
in front of the
yeah,
road. So
yeah.
I think that, yeah.
Yeah, there's puddles and there's ponds, and around here we tend to get puddles that aren't going to be that deep that you can go through. But whether you drive through puddles, even for human drivers, it's going to depend upon a lot of different situations. So, where I am up north, if there's a puddle, people have no problem driving through it. We'll do that a lot. Some places where I'm driving around here in Florida, you just don't want to go through a puddle really quickly because you'll splash a pedestrian. You have to be careful of that. So there have been times I've disengaged because I realized, oh no, I'm about to get someone really wet, even though it looks like FSD is going to go along pretty well. Sometimes, you can't avoid a puddle because there might be oncoming traffic, but there are times, in Florida that I've been sort of advised, especially in the beachfront areas, you do not want to go through a puddle, even though it's just recently rained, because the chances are that puddle is very briny. And that means all you're doing is just like getting the salt all over your car. So you really want to avoid the puddles around here. So that's going to be one of those edge cases for FSD to figure out, what's the best puddle strategy, depending upon all these different weird factors.
And the other one is you talked about the sun distraction. I think I had it like a year ago, but ever since then, I don't think I've had that issue. Ever since they updated it, I haven't had a problem. But I had a time when in the evening it would constantly disengage because of the angle of the sunset. I haven't had
Yeah.
that problem in like a
I,
year.
I haven't had it disengaged, but I have had it slow down at least 5 miles per hour from the speed limit.
Okay, so
That I've noticed that. Yeah. So if I'm going like due east, it'll slow down in a 45 to about 40. And if it takes a turn where it's now heading due north and the speed limit's 45, whoop, it'll go right up to 45. And then if it turns again east and it's in the sun, whoop, I see it go down. But that's V12 or V11 rather.
Sat, so you've had V12 for, I don't know, maybe 12 hours, just high level, right? Is it better than version 11? What ways is it better? Is this going to be, in your mind, the solution to us, or is there going to be, have you had many disengagement? Have you had any critical scenarios? Just high level, what's your opinion?
I think it's a little more human-like, a little more aggressive. Whereas before it was much more a little too cautious. So in that sense, I think it's getting much closer to the way that we drive. I like the comfort better, and I think probably you still have the edge cases that you have to work out with. So I mean, I use it 85-90% of the time. It's a much better ride right now, and I think I mean, I don't know how much more you can improve in terms of the wide quality because of the way it slows down and the way that accelerates. Uh, it's definitely much better. So in that sense, I think if you had a spouse that wasn't really on board with it, I think, or other family members, I think they would be a lot more inclined to be okay with it and approve it. So I think the ride quality has improved, but there are certain parts where if there's high traffic and there's a lot of rain, it still requires a little bit of intervention like on occasion, because yeah, I haven't encountered this kind of rain here for a very long time, and yeah, the amount of traffic and accidents that it's caused, it's kind of it comes to like a very slow stop, or they were trying to go into the other lane, but I didn't feel it was safe enough because it's too close to the car. So I disengaged because of that. But it could have made it through. But because of the rain and so much traffic, I didn't want to take that risk at this point. So I'm still kind of getting used to it. But I think the ride quality is much better, and I didn't like that occasional jerkiness that you'd get in the when you switch the lanes or you decelerate. Um, and go through this one pass that I have a little trouble with all the time, today or tomorrow, and see how it does differently, because that was a bigger case where those two traffic lights and one would be green and the second one would be red. I want to see if it can react better to that one, but I haven't been able to try that street yet.
Have you had edge cases that 11 and previous versions were not able to do, but now it's able to do that, or you did not experience that?
Yeah, I haven't gone to that. I had to go to that road first. That's a very particular road that I want to go to check, because it's not normal to have two traffic lights like right after each other, but it's like over a railroad, so it's very close in distance. So I want to try that one out. But the construction area is a part that I consistently had to watch out for, and it was very uncomfortable into the ride because there's a lot of bumpy, like the road isn't paved done, and signs and stuff. So it wasn't a comfortable ride, but the V12 is definitely better in that area that I went through, that construction area. So I mean, I took it there on purpose to also to figure that part out if the difference is big, and it's way better. So, and I was doing it in at nighttime, so it was even harder for me to actually physically see. So I would be driving that area kind of on my own memory, but obviously FSD doesn't really matter if it's night or day. It was still able to do it, so I like the ride a lot better. I think
And then,
they did a great job on
yeah,
that.
have you had any critical scenarios that has happened?
Just trying to move into a lane that's probably a little too close for my comfort
That was
level.
it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. But
that was
nothing
it.
like it took a sharp turn right when you weren't expecting or anything that
No,
big. Like, as
no,
my
none of
question
that.
is, like, if you were in charge, and I know it's only 12 hours, so you don't know yet, but would you go ahead and go wide with this?
I mean, it's hard to say because I think a bigger pool of people is definitely, but there are those edge cases, and then you don't want it to have those people on the edge cases that they live in a particular area and particular weather, and they're gonna say, "Oh, it doesn't work." So I think they should definitely spread out to bigger group. Uh, but I don't know if it's gonna be good for every single for public, like every single person, because there's certain edge cases that's probably still not going to be finished with. And I mean, even now when the FS is not even being used, they try to put it in the news and bash it. It's pretty ridiculous. So in
Sat,
terms of that, I feel like the technology has come to where for most people, I think it'll be okay.
Sat, what do you make of you getting it before like OG beta testers, and um, do you think that's significant, or what do you think?
So I think there's two different factors on why certain people get it. I think one is the area, and then two is how often or how much you use the actual car. Because I have two cars, like I have the 3 and the Y, and both of them have FSD. My 3 hasn't gotten the V12 because I drive my Y more, significantly more. So when I was driving the 3 significantly more, that one was getting it first. So that's just my anecdotal view of what I've noticed. And I usually was the third group that would get it. So there would be like the OG people who would get it first, typically the ones after the employee, and then like the second group after that, I would typically get it. But I drive quite a bit in this Y, so and like 80-90% of it's on FSD, so they should have a lot more data from this car. And I think when you use it more and they know that you're using the FSD more, they kind of prioritize that. That's my hunch because I have two cars with FSD.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sat. Appreciate we actually had somebody who with the FSD version 12. Thank you, Scott, for telling us and getting us up to speed with what's happening with the bot. Great conversation today about ChatGPT moment. I think for the most part, we are not confident that there will be a ChatGPT moment this year for either FSD or bot. I'm still believing that investors will recognize it, maybe not quite to the extent of ChatGPT moment, but it might happen. So thank you guys very much. We do this every Tuesday. Appreciate everybody. Talk to you
Thanks,
soon.
Herbert.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thank you. Bye now.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.